Good morning. My name is Jo Reingold, and I'm here interviewing Jay Beck. Today is August 1st, 2024, and so happy to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Jay, tell us a bit about what you'd like to, about your family, your background, whatever you remember about your grandparents and your parents, where they lived, what they did, etc.
Well, let me start in the beginning. I was born at Baylor Hospital on May 23rd, 1932. Um, the first things that I really remember was growing up at the Melrose Hotel. The Melrose Hotel, I think, is on Oak Lawn. At that time, it was an apartment hotel. So my mother and father and I had an apartment at the hotel. My mother and father worked, so they had a maid or nanny or whatever you want to call it who took care of me while they were both gone. I had free range of the entire Melrose Hotel. The elevator had an elevator operator, so I could go and come as I chose. And I knew where the best cookies were available, and I knew who had dogs and cats to play with, etc. And I also knew that if I went downstairs to the main lobby, at the front desk, people would leave pocket change for me every day. And I would get the pocket change without problems. In the back of the Melrose Hotel, where the parking lot is, was a sand pile, and I could play in the sand pile with other children who were still there. Down the street from the Melrose Hotel was a daycare that I went to periodically. My sister was born January the 1st, 1936. She was the centennial baby of the whole state of Texas, the first child born in the state that year. And I remember seeing a picture of her as a newborn in a cowboy hat that was a full page picture in the newspaper. My sister came home to the Melrose Hotel, and we stayed there for a short period of time, and then we moved to North Dallas. We actually moved to Preston Hollow before there was much out there. We lived on a street called Mimosa, and I think that street is still there.
Yes, it is.
And it's just north of Northwest Highway. But around us, there were very few houses, and a farmer was still plowing and planting right behind our house. So it was an interesting time. We stayed there a year or two, I think. And then we moved back to South Dallas. And we moved to Park Row in a fourplex. This was a two-story house with two different families living upstairs and two families living downstairs. We were downstairs. Upstairs was a family by the name of Sussman, and there was a son named R.E. that was basically my age. This was the cross street on Park Row was Jeffries, I think. And we were a half a block away from John Henry Brown's school, which is where I went to grade school. Going down the street as a very young child, I don't know how I got down there, but in the 2300 block of Park Row was a 2 or 3 story frame building that was a Hebrew school. And the Hebrew school was run by a Mr. Levine. And Mr. Levine lived on Park Row at the corner of Jeffries on Park Row upstairs. And he had 2 children named Raphael and Ami. That original Hebrew school was torn down sometime. And the school moved to the second house on Park Row past Edgewood, going towards Fair Park, if you will. And he continued to run the school, Mr. Levine did. It's interesting that I went there for a few years until my father and Mr. Levine had a falling out. Mr. Levine wanted children to stay out of school for 2 days for Rosh Hashanah. And my father said, no, 1 day. And so he went up there and talked to Mr. Levine, and they could not come to a conclusion that they were both satisfied with. As a result, that was my end of Hebrew school.
How old were you then? How long did you go?
I have no idea.
No.
Young, still young.
Did you have a bar mitzvah?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
At the corner of South Boulevard and Harwood, I think, was Temple Emmanuel. And my father was on the board of Sheriff Israel. And he had a falling out with the board because he learned that certain people had seats which at Sheriff Israel are for sale. But these people didn't have to pay for their seats. So my father was unhappy about that, and we moved to Temple Emmanuel. My grandfather on my mother's side was named Hyman Gendel, and he had seats on the second or third row down front on one side of the auditorium at Sheriff Israel. And he was I'm not sure what it's called exactly, but a Kohen or something like that. And during part of the services, he and the other men who were Kohens would go up to the pulpit and daven under taluses. Interesting.
They still do that.
They still do that.
Kohanim. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I got the word right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we became members of Temple Emmanuel. And I was bar mitzvahed at Temple Emmanuel. And Rabbi Lefkowitz lived on South Boulevard, about 2 or 3 blocks from where I lived, on Park Row. And I used to walk to his house to being taught my part of the bar mitzvah. I was also married at Cherith at Temple Emmanuel.
Were you at the original one, or had it moved?
No, original.
The original one.
Yeah, we're down.
Yeah.
We're down there at the original
Yeah.
temple. My father got very involved at Temple Emmanuel, and he became the Boy Scout leader of Troop 29, which was the Temple Emmanuel troop. And during the war, we had a trailer, and the Boy Scouts would go out and do paper drives and all sorts of things related to the war effort. I remember listening to the radio in my house at 2317 Park Row. We had moved from way up there to a duplex down, and I remember listening to the radio when Pearl Harbor was bombed.
Oh, wow.
December the 7th. I think it was 41. Okay. The big 3-story Hebrew school had been torn down and taken away. And we were the corner house, and between us and the rest, it was an empty lot. And there was then a railroad track. So Edgewood, railroad track, 1 block. During the winter, we played football. During the summer, we played softball. And when the war came, my dad had the lot plowed, and it became a victory garden for the entire neighborhood. Interesting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
2317 was a duplex. And we lived in one side of it, and the other people were called, his name was Joe Spiritus. And I think he had a packing plant. Not sure, but I think so. An interesting situation happened. We were very friendly with a family by the name of Finger in Houston. My mother and dad were in their wedding. They were in my mother and dad's weddings. So they had known each other for a long time. And we went to Houston occasionally to visit and stayed at their house. And one Christmas time, we went there. Dallas had a major freeze. Mr. Spiritus opened a little door in the wall of the house, on the outside of the house, and he could see the pipes which had frozen, and he stuffed that area full of newspaper and lit it and burned our house down to the ground while we were gone.
Oh my God.
At that time, we spent 3 or 4 months at my grandfather's house while they rebuilt the duplex. And I went to South Dallas probably 2 or 3 years ago, and that house is still standing. And I have a picture of it somewhere.
Uh-huh. Hold it up a little bit. There you go.
That's my house.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's looking at it
Yeah.
from Park Row.
Uh-huh. I guess it was well built.
Well, it got rebuilt,
Rebuilt.
but it looks pretty good. And the lot, that big area where we played football and softball was named Beck's Lot.
Oh.
Everybody knew it. And, people just came in the afternoon after school, and we played. Across the street, on Park Row, down at the railroad track, was a house, and my best friend lived in that house. His name was Sammy Griggs. And we were the same age. And he said to me, you ought to look into going to Camp Dallas. I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, well, Camp Dallas is an ROTC camp. And kids come from every school, and we go out there for a month and play soldier. I said, oh, well, how do I do that? He said, you need to go down to the high school and talk to them. Forest Avenue High School, which is now James Madison High School, right?
Yeah.
Had an ROTC group, and so I talked to the commanding officer of that. He was a teacher, he was not just a kid in
Right.
ROTC. And I said, I'd like to go to Camp Dallas. And he said, okay, you can go, but you've got to come here for a couple of weeks after school, and let's learn how to march, drill, do the things you're supposed to do
Right.
as an ROTC student, which I did. And for 4 years, every summer, I went to Camp Dallas, which was in Mineral Wells, Texas.
Oh, okay.
Now, we were in full military uniform. That's all we had. And we stayed in tents. And it was hot. We didn't have much trouble with rain. But right next door, butting up to Camp Dallas, was Camp Walters, which was a major military base. We finally figured out that we could march up to the gate, and they would let us in because we looked like soldiers. And we'd go in, and they had first-run movies every night. And occasionally we would go to canteens and partake, including beer. As a high school kid, this was fantastic. At the end of camp, there was a formal dance at the Baker Hotel in Mineral Wells.
Oh, okay.
This was a formal dance for the kids who were old enough to have dates. And I remember asking a girl from high school to come and stay at the Baker Hotel and be my date. After high school, I got accepted to Rice, which is where I went to college. And it was really sort of interesting because I applied and I got couple of letters of recommendation from teachers. And I was told that I needed a personal interview, and that the person was coming and he was going to be at Woodrow Wilson High School here in Dallas. And they made an appointment for me at a certain time, and I showed up. And I walked in, and the man said, "You know, your grades aren't good enough to go to Rice." Now, I had reasonably good grades, and a few not so good grades, but reasonably good grades. And I said, "Well, then, why am I here?" And he said, "Well, you've done a lot of other things that are of interest. You lettered in tennis. You were on the basketball team. You were on the rifle team. We had a rifle team, and we shot in the basement of Forest Avenue High School down there. We shot 22s down there." And he said, "You know, you were colonel of," I was the colonel of the ROTC. I got to the top rank of the students.
Right.
So for a year I was colonel of the ROTC. So you've done a bunch of stuff, and that's sort of interesting to us. We'll let you know. So ultimately, I was accepted with the "but" letter, "but we don't have a place for you in the dormitory, so you're going to have to find your own room and board somewhere else." It worked out. I went to Rice and did not graduate. I went to Rice for 3 years. And I took one course at SMU, and together I had enough courses to try and get into medical school at the end of 3 years. So I applied, and I got accepted to all 3 medical schools in Texas: Southwestern, Baylor in Houston, and Galveston in Galveston. And I elected to go to Southwestern. Southwestern was very interesting because it was in prefabricated huts behind Old Parkland Hospital, which was on Maple Avenue. I don't know whether you ever remember Old Parkland Hospital.
I do.
Anyway, the medical school was in these shacks. For instance, when we had cold weather, the pipes were exposed underneath. They froze, which means we couldn't wash our hands, and school was out for a few days. It was great fun.
Did they build permanent buildings when you were there? While you were
No.
there, they did not.
Well,
Well.
I'm not sure what year, but Texas came through and inspected our school and decided that they were going to build a medical school here in Dallas. And the first building of what is now Southwestern Medical School, which you can't see anymore because it's been encompassed in other buildings. But my senior year, we had lectures over there in the new building.
It's quite a complex now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
It just grew and grew.
It's grown and grown and grown.
Oh my.
Let me tell you about my families. My grandmother and grandfather. My grandfather was Hyman Gendel. They married in Poland. And I'm not sure, but I remember a name being battered around among the family that they grew up in a place called Tamashev. I can't find it on a map.
Probably changed spelling or something.
Well, it was basically on the Russian-Polish border. And at one time, the border would move from time to time. But anyway, they considered themselves Polish. Okay. And they came to the United States by way of Galveston. He was a carpenter and stopped in Marshall to work at the railroad yards, building Pullman cars, doing the carpentry work on the inside of the cars before they came to Dallas. And I don't know what happened exactly, but he ended up owning 2 laundries in Oak Cliff. The Lakeside and the Paramount. The Lakeside was on Jefferson, and the Paramount was on Marsalis, just as you went over the bridge. So the entire family periodically worked at these 2 entities. They had a number of children. My mother, Fanny, was the oldest. Then there was Bess, twins, Neiman and Marcus, and the youngest was Joe. Joe became a doctor, and Bess never married. On the other side of the family was Jacob and Molly Beck. Both of those people had tuberculosis. Jacob actually went to Denver to be in a hospital there. Somehow Molly survived, and as far as I know, as a kid, there was no sign that she was sick. Jacob died in 1930 of tuberculosis. And my mother and father were getting married, but the wedding was delayed slightly. So they probably got married in 31, and I was born in 32. Now, Molly was always called Bubby by me and by the people that knew her. She lived alone on Warren Avenue, south of Forest Avenue, and a block from Colonial Hills School. And she had a very simple life. For instance, She did not have a refrigerator. She had ice delivered to the house. There was a plaque that she put in the front window that said 25, 50, 75, and 100. And depending on which way the plaque was turned, the Iceman knew what to bring into the house. And occasionally in the summer, when the ice melted faster than could be, and if I stayed overnight at their house, which I did occasionally, she would send me with a little red wagon. 2 blocks away, there was an ice house, and I could buy 25 pounds of ice for peanuts, small amounts of money. She and Jacob had a number of children. There was Sam, the oldest, and he was in, I don't know what you call it, clothing stores. He worked at Sanger's at one time. There was Maurice, which was my father. There was Elizabeth and Frida. Elizabeth married Joe Ray. Who else did I say? Shirley.
There was another girl. I can't remember the name now.
I can't
Elizabeth
either.
and
Wait a minute. Frida. Frida married somebody by the name of Angrist. And my cousin Stanley Angrist and I grew up together. And I said Elizabeth was Aunt Lizzie, and she married. There was Goldie, and Goldie married, I can't remember who. And there was AJ, the youngest. And AJ went to night school at SMU, got a law degree, went to Washington to sort of work in government. And while he was in high school and SMU, he took flying lessons at Love Field. And he joined the Army Air Force in World War II. And he was in the Pacific, and he flew combat missions in the Pacific. And when he got out of the military, back here in Dallas, he married Ann Michelin. And out of the clear blue, he was invited to come back into the military by somebody important. I can't think of his name. Anyway, and he went back in as a colonel and actually ended up a general in the Air Force.
did he move from Dallas?
What?
Did he move back to Washington? No.
Oh, no.
He stayed.
When he was in the Air Force, he was all over.
Oh.
Interesting story I'll get to in a little while. But he was in SAC, Strategic Air Command, and ultimately was a general. And of course, I was in the Air Force. But first I went to medical school. I while I was in medical school, I got a letter from my draft board saying you're 1A and we're coming to get you soon. And I thought this was terrible. So I realized somewhere that I heard that there was a way to get out of that draft if I signed up for something special. It was called the Berry Plan. It was designed by a general by the name of Cortlandt Berry. And he said, we would rather take people who were becoming doctors and let them finish their training, whatever residency they wanted, and then draft them, rather than take them out of school somewhere below that and just have a soldier, marching. So I joined the Berry Plan. And I got deferred for the 4 years of medical school. And then I took an internship. And I took a 3-year residency at Baylor in OB-GYN. And I was then available, and I went into the Air Force in Orlando, Florida, as a captain doing OB-GYN.
The war wasn't over yet by then?
Well,
Just about?
Different wars.
Oh. Uh-huh.
I was in Orlando during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Remember that?
I do.
Anyway, let's see, where was I?
What did you do after the Air Force?
Oh, I was getting out of the Air Force in 2 years, and I came back to Dallas to look around to see if I could, find a place to practice. And I asked around, and there was a doctor who was in single practice in the one of the buildings around Baylor Hospital, and I went to his office basically to look and see what an office looked like. And I drew a floor plan on a piece of paper, and while I was there, he came in, and his name was Stuart Fish, and he said, I forgot all about you coming back. He had been one of my teachers at Baylor when I was a resident. He said, I've asked a guy from the East Coast to come in and be my partner, and he hasn't answered me. But if he doesn't come, would you be willing to be my partner? And I said, certainly. And that's what happened. I became his partner in one of the buildings near Baylor. We covered for each other for the weekends, sometimes. And he told me he was going out of town for the weekend and wanted me to make sure I was around. He came back and said, I have been accepted as assistant professor of OB-GYN in Arkansas. And I'm leaving the practice in a month. Here's the deal. Would you stay? Would you continue to hire my nurse? Would you allow me to store my furniture in your office? And at some later time, we can decide what to do about the furniture. in the meantime, would you let my nurse collect my bills that are
Yes.
due me? And take over my lease. I said, it sounds too good to be true. So I went into private practice by myself. Later on, are you going?
Yes. Go ahead. Phone ringing.
Okay. Later on, I was practicing by myself, and a doctor who was in partnership with two other doctors in the same building came to me one afternoon late and said, I need a place to practice. And I said, what's going on? He said, well, I've had a falling out with my partners. I said, well, when? He said, Monday. That was on Friday. So he became my associate. We were not partners. We had individual practices
Right.
in the same office, and his name was Joe Godat. And we practiced together for a few years, and then he moved to a bigger office somewhere.
When in here did you have time to get married? Or did you?
An interesting story.
Yes.
I was in medical school, and I got a call from somebody I didn't know. And she said, my name is Joan, and I heard about you through some friends of mine in the sorority at the University of Texas. And I understand you take out blind dates. And I said, well, sometimes. And she said, well, it's Easter holiday coming up, and I have a friend who's with me who lives in Alabama, and I need a date for her, and we'll double date, and we'll go have dinner, go dancing or something on the weekend. I said, okay, I'll do it. So I met Joan Roth. She was originally from Marshall, and her father was in the cotton business. And he ultimately died, and her mother and Joan, and she had a brother, an older brother that did not come with them, but they moved to Dallas. And they were in an apartment on Northwest Highway in that, groups there. There was, I can't think of the names of the apartments there.
Off of Preston, that whole group?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Off of between Preston and
Hillcrest, right.
Anyway, so we had a wonderful time on the date. I mean, she was not my date. But I put her name in the back of my mind. And the following 4th of July, it took me that long from Easter to, I asked her for a date. And we went out and watched fireworks at Lake Dallas. Lake White Rock Lake.
Oh.
And And that was the beginning. And we dated, and when I was between my senior year in medical school, we got married. And went on a honeymoon to Mexico, Acapulco, Mexico City, etc.
So how did your family grow?
Well, Joan and I had 3 children. Michael, Gary, and Pamela. Michael is here in Dallas, and he is a money manager. Gary is in Oklahoma, and he works for Amazon in their warehouse. And Pam had a number of what I call odd jobs in the fashion industry. But she's basically just a retired mother.
Okay. Does she live here?
And she lives here in Dallas.
Okay.
And, plays tennis, plays pickleball, and buys my groceries for me.
Oh, that's good.
Right.
You're lucky that you get to see them, that they're around you.
Oh, yes. Right. And, Michael actually joined Gerald Ray in business. He went to Duke and got a degree in business. And then for a short time went to a bank in Florida. And then he came back to some stockbroking business in Preston Center. And then he went with Gerald Ray. And it was, Gerald Ray and Associates for many years. And they managed money for many people. I think Gerald had some very special clients, like the Zales, the Lipschys, what have you. But anyway, Gerald is now retired. Michael is the head honcho, and it's not Gerald Ray and Associates anymore.
Right. So what kind of things have you been involved in since those days in the community, Jewish community and civic community?
Not much.
No. That's okay. How long did your career last as a doctor?
Well, I retired when I was 70, and I'm 92 now.
So you've been doing something, right, between then and now?
Yeah,
Okay.
basically taking care of this house, trying to survive my orthopedic problems.
Okay.
Now, I don't know whether you want this or not, but this is a sort of a map of what I remember. And it's not going to take a picture of, but for instance, these are the people that I remember. For instance, the Gendels lived on a street called Holmes. And I could walk from my house on Park Row, down Grand Avenue, crossing Irving, and get to Home Street. And the Gendels were the third house on that first block. I don't know who was in the first house. A Mrs. Hawks, a single lady, a single elderly lady, was in the second house. And she had a gorgeous backyard with flower beds and bushes and stuff. And she had a full-time gardener that worked there every day. His name was Lodge. And he was a black man. And then next to the Gendels was another house, and I don't know who was there. And then the final house on the block was a duplex with the Gorin in one area and the Richmonds in another area. And I don't know which one, but some of them were cousins of the Gendels. The Gorins had a daughter named Rebecca, and Rebecca married J. Rudberg. The Rudbergs lived on South Boulevard. And the Rudbergs lived next to the Rutlands on one side and the Rachofskis on another side. Mr. Rudberg, Leon Rudberg, was a manufacturing jeweler.
Right.
He was in a building that was catty-corner from Neiman Marcus across Commerce Street. And this was a building which full of small offices. And my dad even had an office there at one time. When I got engaged, my grandmother, Toby, gave me her diamond ring and said, "You can have this for your bride." And I took the diamond ring with my father, and we went to Leon Rudberg's jewelry business, and he took the stone out and made me a new mounting. The stone was a European cut, which is not as good as the cuts that are happening nowadays, but it was an okay stone. And that was my wife's wedding ring. Interesting.
And his son is still a jeweler.
Hmm?
Carrie Rudberg has continued the
You're
legacy. No, he's still a jeweler.
kidding. Okay.
He has an office. Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you about the Rudbergs. Marty Rudberg was my age. We were, little children together. And Marty had a set of things where he could pour lead into units and make lead soldiers. And we do this out in his backyard. I mean, he would have a fire going to melt the lead, and we'd pour this hot lead into the gadgets, let it cool, take out the soldiers, and then we'd paint them. And he had a whole army of painted soldiers. Now, where could you find lead today? to do that. Where could a kid do that?
Scrapyard. I don't know.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. Maybe a battery place, but then you have to deal with the acid from the batteries. Interesting deal.
So tell us about, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about Fair Park or your involvement with that.
Okay, well, let's talk about my dad.
Okay.
When I was growing up, everybody in the family worked in the laundries. Everybody on that side of the family. Mother was a bookkeeper, and my dad did something around in the plant. And ultimately, he had a falling out with a brother-in-law and quit. And the next thing I remember is that he had a job with the park department. In Fair Park, there's the music hall. And next to the music hall, on the south side, is a big parking lot. Now, talk about now. But back then, there was no parking lot there. It was the number 2 and the number 1 lighted softball diamond for the city of Dallas. And my dad would go out there every night during the summer and make sure the games were going okay. When I got old enough, he would take me along and get me a job shagging foul balls or running the scoreboard. And I think I made 25 or 50 cents per game. Interesting. In the winter, the automobile building is basically across the street from the music hall and down a little bit. And the automobile building was empty during the winter. And the floor of the automobile building was marked off into basketball courts. And my dad had an office in the automobile building during the winter where he made sure everything was going okay with the basketball stuff.
It's hard to picture that right these days, you know.
Hard to picture, what, 6 basketball courts
right.
next to each other?
Just interesting use of space, you know.
Right. At the very end of the automobile building, towards the south, was a small roller skating rink, separate from the rest of the automobile building. And there was also an ice skating arena on the back of the Cotton Bowl area. There were 2 buildings. The first one was general exhibits and things like that. Then there was a little space, and the next building now is animals, etc. But when I was growing up in high school, that was an ice skating arena.
Year round?
I don't know. I can't remember. There was also, if you keep going south, where there's now that huge parking area for Fair Park, there was a grandstand and an oval racetrack. And I think at one time there was horse racing there before my time.
That makes sense.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had a concert across from the amphitheater, across from the grandstand, when I was a kid. He had music people come and do things, which my dad did. Going back, after his tenure with the park department, I think he was not doing anything. And he was in the Kiwanis Club. And the Kiwanis Club, either regularly, yearly, or maybe they just thought about it, had an event where they had musicians and actors and what have you put on a show. And they asked my dad, who was not doing anything, if he would be in charge of the event. But that meant selling tickets, and it meant making a program and selling advertising. So he got an office in that same building where Leon Rootberg had an office, and had guys working telephones in there. He'd call them, these people cold call, do you want to put your company in a program for the Kiwanis Club? And he got so good at it that that other clubs, like the Lions Club, would also come to him. So he had a group of clubs that used him as their
ad man.
Ad man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's great.
I have another story about the Kiwanis. The Kiwanis had a weekend fishing trip down to the coast. And my dad said, "Do you want to go?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go." He said, "Well, you'll miss Monday of high school." I said, "That's no big problem." So we went and had a marvelous time. And so Tuesday morning, I'm going back to school, and I had to go to the office with a note, from my mother saying, "Please excuse," because he was gone on a fishing trip. And the lady who ran the office got hysterical, mad at this idea, and took me by the arm to the principal's office. And the principal was named Whittlesey. And she said, "He was out of school yesterday because of a fishing trip." And the principal said, "Yes, I know. I went. I'm in the Kiwanis Club too."
That's good. You weren't in trouble.
I was not in trouble.
No, not at all.
When I was a senior in high school, I was in, I guess what would be considered now an advanced math class. The teacher was the counselor for the kids. And she came to me and said, "Look, I've got some work that I've got to do with a whole bunch of people going to college. And I need 3 or 4 days where I won't be able to teach. Can you sort of hold the class together and keep them so that they're not killing each other, etc.? And, do whatever you want to otherwise. And I said, sure, I think I can. So I became the teacher of this advanced math class. And we plowed through 2 chapters of the book in 4 days.
Wow.
With me teaching.
Too bad you weren't paid as a teaching assistant.
I was not paid at all.
That's not fair.
Well, I have a feeling that
Well.
it was probably not fair for her to do that.
Not too kosher, no.
Right. I also I got the only F on a paper that I wrote while I was in high school.
Yeah.
Mary Smith Clark was my English teacher. It's amazing I remember these names.
The people that really influenced you in school.
Right. And she said, okay, I want y'all to write a paper about what you did during the summer. I thought, okay. And I wrote a paper about me going on a boating trip. And I said, we had some trouble. Couldn't get the boat started. The generator wouldn't gen. The carburetor wouldn't carb. And the pistons, well, they wouldn't work either, which is exactly what I wrote. And she got hysterical and gave me an F on the paper.
I guess it wasn't your proudest moment.
Oh, I was hysterical about it. I thought it was funny.
But you graduated anyway, probably with honors.
Well, no, I didn't graduate Forest Avenue High School with honors.
Oh.
I just graduated.
Okay.
I also caused a fire drill. We had homeroom where we were allowed to go and work on whatever we did, not attended by a teacher. And I was in chemistry at the time, and I asked the chemistry teacher, would it be okay if I skipped that homeroom stuff and came down to the lab and did experiments? No problem. The class would be empty. The lab would be empty while I was there. And I did, and I mixed a few things together, and it made the biggest smoke screen storm you have ever seen. And of course, they thought the high school was on fire, and they did a fire drill for the entire school.
You're lucky you didn't burn the school down.
No, just made smoke.
Just me. Oh boy.
What else would you like to talk about?
Well, the last thing I want to ask you is, what, in your opinion, if you can pick one thing, what are you the most proud of?
Well, I'm the most proud of my medical training. The residency that I took at Baylor Hospital. I ended up being the chief resident of OB-GYN. But I did a lot of things, you know, on the way up to that level.
Mm-hmm.
The nurses in the labor delivery room, if there was a major problem with somebody, would try and get me. They figured, correctly so, that I could handle most problems well.
Mm-hmm.
The operating room also called me in on some very interesting things. For instance, I'm now chief resident, and of course, when somebody operates on somebody, we give them a resident as an assistant. And I got called to the operating room by Ms. Belay, that was her name. And I got up there and she said, "We got a problem. There's a doctor down there doing a hysterectomy, and he is now on the floor in the corner of the room mumbling to himself. And the surgery has stopped in the middle. What do we need to do?" And I said, "Well, call Dr. Strother, who was head of the OB-GYN department. He had a son that was also by the name of Dr. Strother, but the old Dr. Strother, and tell him what's going on." And I went down there, and I took over the surgery. So a resident and I finished the hysterectomy, and the doctor on the floor was taken to the funny farm.
That's
I
a
mean,
shame.
he had a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, I guess it happens.
Right.
Rare, but it happens. Well, I want to thank you so much.
I'm not through.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
Another time I got called to the operating room, and they said, "We've got a problem. There's a general surgeon who's doing a vaginal hysterectomy. He's been in there for 3.5 or 4 hours on a case which normally takes an hour and a half. And things aren't going well. Could you go in and see if you can help?" So I went in and I said to the doctor, "Would you like me to help? I can scrub in and help you." And he said, "Yes." And when I scrubbed in, he moved out of the way. And I sat down in the middle and finished the surgery. I mean, these were things that I was allowed to do, and things that I probably love to do.
Right.
Also, I took out one of the biggest tumors from a lady that anybody has ever seen. It weighed 16 pounds. And I got a thank you note from her afterwards. I'm sure you don't want to see it, but I've got pictures of it. I mean, it was like a double-sized basketball.
Wow. Well, I'm sure that your patients are grateful for you.
Okay?
All those years. Yes.
Now, if you would like this map, I can give it to you.
Okay. Thank you. Very good.
Also, I'm sure you don't know the name, but on Edgewood, next to the street that we were on the corner of, behind me on Grand Avenue was a Jewish synagogue, a little small synagogue. And I have no idea what its name is.
It might have been Agudas Achim or
Well-
Tiferet. They were both very small in that area.
I thought Agunas-Achim was on Forest Avenue.
I can't remember, but I know it was small,
Yeah.
Orthodox, right?
Right, totally Orthodox.
Maybe, I don't know for sure. Maybe that's where it moved to. I'm not sure.
Well, no.
No.
This was,
Anshe Sephard was in a different neighborhood.
it could have been Tifereth Israel.
Could
I
have
think
been.
you're right. Well, let me tell you.
Yeah.
They had services every night.
Mm.
And they needed a minion.
Mm-hmm.
And we would be at home eating dinner. And somebody would come to our door and say, "Can you come help us and be a minion?" So my dad and I would go to the Orthodox shul. I couldn't follow what they were doing at all. But I knew that they all had a glass of schnapps at the end.
Every night.
Every night.
Every night. Wow. That's amazing.
They did this every night.
Yeah.
And they needed 10 men.
Well, you did a mitzvah. You really did.
Hysterical.
Yeah. So I'll be happy to take that. Sure. Anything else before we end? I think you covered a lot.
I did cover a lot.
Yes,
right.
you did. Well, thank you for doing this with me. It's
Oh,
going to be great.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Well, are you through?
Yeah.
Have you stopped it?
I'm about to.
Don't stop it.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Some interesting things that I remember on Forest Avenue was the Forest Avenue Theater, which is still there.
They're refurbishing
And
it
they're
now.
refurbishing
Right.
it. Right.
Yeah.
Down the street from the forest was Blinn Brothers Bakery, a Jewish bakery. And across the street from the bakery, or thereabouts, was the Cohen Candy Company
I remember that.
and Friedman's Pharmacy, a little hole-in-the-wall pharmacy. It was not like anything that you see today. They filled prescriptions, basically. That's what they did. And then down the street from that was a bank. And then next to the bank was an Italian restaurant where we went and had dinner a number of times. And I think it was the forerunner of Mario's. Remember Mario's Italian restaurant?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so
I
much.
think I'm through now.
Okay. Thank you. Today is August 8th, 2024. My name is Joe Reingold, and I'm here interviewing Jay Beck, this is an addendum to a previous interview that he had recently. Good afternoon, Mr. Beck. How are you?
I'm just fine.
So, go for it. What would you like to add to us? Tell us.
To start with, I listed the families of the Becks and the Gendells. And in the families of the Becks, first of all, my grandfather was Jacob. My grandmother was Molly. And Jacob died around 1930. But there was a whole group of aunts and uncles following. And I think I mentioned most of them, but I'm going to try and go over them again. Uncle Sam was the oldest. Maurice, my father, was next. There were a number of female aunts, including Shirley, Elizabeth, Goldie, and the one that I left out the other day was Kate. Kate married somebody by the name of Jack Blum, and they lived in Fort Worth. So they sort of disappeared from the rest of the family. And the youngest child was AJ. I think I talked about AJ some, but let me sort of redo it. He ultimately became an attorney, graduating from SMU Law School at night. And from there he went to work in Washington, D.C. as an attorney. When he was younger, he took flying lessons at Love Field and learned how to fly, small aircraft. When the war broke out, December 7th, 1941, he volunteered and went into the Army Air Corps, that's what it was called in those days. And he took flight training and got his wings in San Antonio. A whole lot of the family went there to watch the procedure when he got his wings. During the war, he flew fighter planes in the Pacific. And ultimately, he flew around some of the high-ranking officers. I think he was a lieutenant, but he flew around some of the colonels and generals here and there. When the war was over, he got out of the Air Corps, and married a lady by the name of Anne Michelin. And he went to work here in Dallas and ultimately was called on the phone by General LeMay. Curtis LeMay was a general, and he told my uncle that he was instrumental in changing the name of the Army Air Corps to call it the Air Force. And he invited my uncle to re-enlist and come in on his general staff. And my uncle quit whatever he was doing and went in at the rank that he had retired, which was probably major or lieutenant colonel. He ultimately worked his way up in the Air Force. He was base commander at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. He was base commander in Newfoundland. And there was a little bit of excitement. I did not want him to know anything about me going into the Air Force. I think I told the story of how I got through medical school, was in the Berry plan, took my residency, and ultimately ended up in Orlando, Florida, as a captain doing OB-GYN in the Air Force. But in talking to my mother, she said, you know, you might let your uncle know what's going on with you. So I learned something, that you could call long distance through the military at no charge. So I was in Orlando, at Orlando Air Force Base, and there was a SAC base across town called McCoy, and I called the McCoy base operator, and I said, I'd like to put in a long distance call to Westover Air Force Base in Massachusetts. They said, no problem. So I got the call through, and they answered in Massachusetts, and I said, I'd like to talk to General Beck. By then, he was a general. And they said, we don't call General Beck on the telephone. And I said, well, let me do two things. First of all, give me your name and rank. And I said, secondly, call the house. If anyone answers, tell them that nephew Jay Beck wanted to speak to the general. And if they say okay, fine. If they say no, I'll hang up and go away. Well, he did it, and Aunt Ann answered the phone, and we talked, and I got AJ on the phone, and he said, you know, it's interesting. McCoy Air Force Base is a SAC base under my command, and I'm coming there to do an inspection next week, and I'll let you know, okay? So I didn't think much about that. On Friday, I took Friday afternoon off in the military. We worked nightly, delivering babies. They came at all hours. And so I worked many more hours than the average person in the Air Force. And as a result, I gave myself Friday afternoon off. I was home cutting the grass at my house, and my wife called me and said, there's somebody who says he's a captain at some Air Force base who has called here 3 times trying to get you on the phone. Do you want to call him back? And I said, sure. So I went in, called the guy. He said, am I glad to get you? General Beck is airborne. And he's flying into McCoy Air Force Base this afternoon, and he wants you to meet the plane. And I said, okay. Well, stupid me, I went in, took a shower, and put on civilian clothes, a Hawaiian sports shirt, etc., and went over to McCoy. And I knew where the administration building was, and I parked my car there and went in, and I said to somebody that I'm here to meet General Beck, who's flying in this afternoon. And he said, okay, join that group over there. Everybody from the base who was high ranking was there to meet General Beck coming in. There was the base commander, there was the deputy base commander, there was the 2 wing commanders, 2 deputy wing commanders, and we had a couple of big cars, and when he landed, we went out and met the plane out on the tarmac. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because they all lined up by rank to meet him. Mm-hmm. So it was the base commander, the deputy base commander, the wing commanders, etc., etc. And here I am, not even in uniform. So I got it to the end of the line. And, he got out of the plane, went down the line. They all saluted as he got to me, and I gave him a hug. From that point, he invited me to come with him into the senior officers' quarters where he was going to stay over the weekend. And he put me in charge of drinks. So I became the bartender. And each one of those people that met the plane came in one at a time, talked to him for a moment. I made him a drink. They took a sip. They left. And AJ and my wife and I went out for dinner that night. So that's a story I hadn't told anybody. Sheriff Israel was on Harwood, close to downtown. And my grandparents on the other side of the family, the Gendel side, were important people in that shul. And my dad was on the board of Sheriff Israel. The rabbi of Sheriff Israel was named Rabbi Gold. And he and my dad were very good friends. And the shul was, was across the street from the back end of a park, City Park. Still, there's a little bit of it left, but it's smaller than it used to be. And on the other side of the park, away from the shul, on Irvy Street, was the Ambassador Hotel, which I think is still there.
I think it is, yeah.
I think it's been tried to be remade 2 or 3 times. That's where Rabbi Gold lived.
Oh, okay.
My dad was friendly with Rabbi Gold, and as a matter of fact, they went fishing occasionally together, which I think is hysterical. And I was a little tiny kid back then. Down the street from Sheriff Israel towards town was a street called Pocahontas. Pocahontas is now gone because there's a highway that's been built in that part of the area. And the Jewish Community Center was on Pocahontas. when I was growing up. The Jewish Community Center had all sorts of things going for it, including a regular-sized basketball court in the community center and a dark room in the community center. I was playing around in high school with photography, and in the Gendel home, off of the dining room, was a small bathroom, which they used as the maid's restroom. I asked my grandparents if I could use that as a dark room when I wanted to do things with photography. And they gave me permission. I painted the windows black. And
I bet the maid loved that.
well, who knows? And I put in a red light that I could turn on and that would not affect my undeveloped film, etc. And I took pictures, and I developed the negatives, and I took pictures. I took the negatives that I wanted to the Jewish Community Center, and they allowed me to use their darkroom to enlarge the photos that I had taken. I have no idea where any of those photos might be now.
Did you donate them somewhere?
I have no idea. I think they were lost in the mail.
That's too bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's probably it.
All
I
right.
can't think of any other things that I left out from when we talked before.
All right. Well,
But I
appreciate
wanted
it.
to add those things because I think they were of interest.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we appreciate your time again, and we will put it all together for
Okay.
you. All right?
Well, let me say one other thing. My dad at one time worked for the city of Dallas. I'm not sure I've mentioned this before. He was in the Park and Recreation department. So I talked about
Yes,
that.
yes.
And I talked about these softball games next to the music hall, etc.
Yeah, I can't even picture that. You said that was just a lot to play ball, and I'm like, oh my God.
There were two lots together. So it was great fun.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that
Yeah.
before.
That was good.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.